The Lord said to Moses, "Before you die, make sure that the Midianites are punished for what they did to Israel." Then Moses told the people, "The Lord wants to punish the Midianites, so tell our men to prepare for battle. Each tribe will send 1,000 men to fight." 12,000 men were picked from the tribes of Israel, and after they were prepared for battle, Moses sent them off to war. Phinehas the son of Eleazar went with them, and took along some things from the sacred tent, and the trumpets for sounding the battle signal. The Israelites fought against the Midianites, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. They killed all the men, including Balaam son of Beor, and the 5 Midianite kings, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba. The Israelites captured every woman and child, then led away the Midianites' cattle and sheep, and took everything else that belonged to them. They also burned down the Midianite towns and villages. Israel's soldiers gathered together everything they had taken from the Midianites, including the captives and the animals. Then they returned to their own camp in the hills of Moab, across the Jordan River from Jericho, where Moses, Eleazar, and the other Israelite leaders met the troops outside camp. Moses became angry with the army commanders and said, "I can't believe you let the women live. They are the ones who followed Balaam's advice and invited our people to worship the god Baal Peor. That's why the Lord punished us by killing so many of our people. You must put to death every boy and all the women who have ever had sex. But do not kill the young women who have never had sex. You may keep them for yourselves." Then Moses said to the soldiers, "If you killed anyone or touched a dead body, you're unclean and have to stay outside the camp for 7 days. On the 3rd and 7th days, you must go through a ceremony to make yourselves and your captives clean. Then wash your clothes and anything made from animal skin, goat's hair, or wood." Eleazar then explained, "If you need to purify something that won't burn, such as gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, or lead, you must first place it in a hot fire. After you take it out, sprinkle it with the water that purifies. Everything else should only be sprinkled with the water. Do all of this just as the Lord commanded Moses. Wash your clothes on the 7th day, and after that you will be clean and may return to the camp." The Lord told Moses, "Make a list of everything taken from the Midianites, including the captives and the animals. Then divide them between the soldiers and the rest of the people. Eleazar the priest and the family leaders will help you. From the half that belongs to the soldiers, set aside for the Lord 1 out of every 500 people or animals, and give these to Eleazar. From the half that belongs to the people, set aside 1 out of every 50, and give these to the Levites in charge of the sacred tent." Moses and Eleazar followed the Lord's instructions and listed everything that had been taken from the Midianites. The list included 675,000 sheep and goats, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 young women who had never had sex. Each half included 337,500 sheep and goats, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 young women. From the half that belonged to the soldiers, Moses counted out 675 sheep and goats, 72 cattle, 61 donkeys, and 32 women, and gave them to Eleazar to be dedicated to the Lord. Then from the half that belonged to the people, Moses set aside 1 out of every 50 animals and women, as the Lord had said, and gave them to the Levites. The army commanders went to Moses and said, "Sir, we have counted our troops, and not one soldier is missing. So we want to give the Lord all the gold jewelry we took from the Midianites. It's our gift to him for watching over us and our troops." Moses and Eleazar accepted the jewelry from the commanders, and its total weight was over 200 kilograms. This did not include the things that the soldiers had kept for themselves. So Moses and Eleazar placed the gold in the Lord's sacred tent to remind Israel of what had happened. The Israelites were nearing the end of their journey to the Promised Land, and as they approached the borders, the tribes of Reuben and Gad saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were ideal for their livestock. Recognizing the fertility and abundance of the region, they approached Moses, requesting to settle there rather than crossing the Jordan River into the land that had been promised to their ancestors. They argued that this land was suitable for their families and animals, and they expressed their desire to claim it as their inheritance. Moses initially responded with frustration and concern, fearing that this request mirrored the actions of their ancestors, who had refused to enter the Promised Land years earlier due to fear and doubt. He worried that the request would discourage the rest of the Israelites from crossing the Jordan and fulfilling God's plan. Moses reminded them of the consequences that had befallen the previous generation for their disobedience, including wandering in the desert for 40 years. He feared that another act of disobedience would bring further punishment upon the people. However, the leaders of Reuben and Gad reassured Moses that they had no intention of abandoning their fellow Israelites. They proposed a compromise. They would build fortified cities in the land for their families and livestock, but the men would still cross the Jordan fully armed, fighting alongside the rest of the tribes until the land across the river was conquered and allotted. Once the other tribes had settled, they would return to their own lands, east of the Jordan. Moses, after consulting with God, agreed to this proposal on the condition that they fulfill their promise to assist their brothers in battle. Satisfied with the arrangement, Moses divided the land of Gilead between the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, another tribe that sought territory on the east side of the Jordan. This region, with its rich pastures and strategic cities, became the inheritance of these tribes. The leaders of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh began preparing their families and livestock for life in these new territories, while also readying their warriors for the battles ahead across the river. With the tribes' agreement settled, the Israelites resumed their preparations for entering the Promised Land. They reviewed the journey they had taken from Egypt, reflecting on the victories and trials they had faced. As they made plans for the conquest of Canaan, Moses issued final instructions regarding the division of the land, the establishment of cities of refuge, and the importance of following God's commands. These instructions underscored the significance of unity and faithfulness as they stood on the threshold of a new chapter in their history.